are very near. Got it. All of you are very near and dear to me, and I see you several times a week. And for the past years, or since the pandemic, you've been a huge influence on my life. And so I'm happy to introduce you to my sponsor, who's going to speak to us today, Wally K. And I have known Wally since about, well, he is very, very dear to me too. And so I hope that you all get a lot from his talk today. He has inspired me through the years. He just recently celebrated his 50th year of sobriety in Alcoholics Anonymous. Yay, congratulations, Wally. Thank you, everybody. Oh boy, he has seen me through thick and thin, and has always been there to support me. And he inspired me to, even though I have fallen down in my journey in sobriety, he's encouraged me to get back up. And of course, if anybody, Wally's seen me at the absolute worst of times, and has drugged me to the hospital and sat with me, and answered my phone calls when I've been completely insane. And I am so grateful to be sober now, to be enjoying him today. And the strength and the foundation that he gives to me is just incredible. So, but that is, that opportunity of sponsorship is open to all of us. And the big thing I wanted to say is Wally's approach has always been wide is the way. You know, in some sort of AA, traditional AA, we hear that narrow is the way. You have to do it this way. Wally has an open mind and has always said, you do what works for you. And that he made the path to sobriety broad for me, and I'm so grateful to him. So that's a long talk. So Wally, I'd like you to meet the Secular Recovery Group, and Secular Recovery Group meet Wally.
Hello, everybody. My name is Wally. I'm an alcoholic. And if anything goes wrong this morning, you know who to blame, Robert. Yeah, I did just celebrate my 50th. There's the big coin with the L on it. Okay, so that's out of the way. But having been through those years, I've been thinking a lot lately about how do I really measure the quality of my sobriety? And does it have anything to do with that L on my medallion? Well, actually, I think time in the program for me is a tertiary measure. It's what have I accomplished for me as far as turning myself into someone that can at least simulate a sober, mature adult. So I'll talk a little bit about what it used to be like, what happened, what it's like today. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what I consider the values of sobriety for me. I started out in a family in Kentucky, which is sort of more or less in the middle of the eastern states in the US. And I had a good middle-class family, and my family loved me very much. I don't understand why in my family it was always dominant women, and we tended to be worthless alcoholic men. But I certainly followed the tradition all the way through grade school, high school. I knew that something was different for me. And I didn't have the tools to figure out just what that was. But I knew it was different. Things just kept popping up. Like I remember I was the only person that I've ever met that was blackballed from the National Honor Society in high school. I had the grades, but my deportment was so bad that a teacher waited until she could ambush me at the ceremony to be picked for the National Honor Society. You had to have A grades, which is top level in the States, and I did. And she just waited and made sure I didn't get to be a member. I don't know why I had those behavior patterns. I'm still looking at it today, but I hadn't had a drink. I was 17 when I left high school. I went to college. Now, looking back on going to college, I went to college about 500 miles, a long day's drive from where I grew up in Kentucky. And looking back, I know what I was doing. I was doing something very alcoholic. I was taking a geographic cure. I was going to go someplace where I could change people, places, and things, and it would all be better. All of the crap from high school would be behind me, and it would be a new Wally. Well, there was one thing I wasn't smart enough to recognize at the time. There was a huge, huge deficiency in my plan. It was me. I was along for that geographic cure. And I wasn't in college a week before I met alcohol. And I began drinking. I was drinking alcoholically within 2 weeks of the first time I had a drink. I could go in and tell you all sorts of stories about my drinking. I could tell you about how much I drank, the dumb things I did. I don't do a lot of drunkalogs anymore because it's really not a contest whether I was a worse drunk than you or vice versa. It's what the alcohol did for me, and it just greased the skids for me and took me downhill a lot faster. And I had not a clue as to what was going on in my life. I didn't even know that alcohol was my problem. I had what I called a ninja level system of denial. I knew something was wrong all the way through college. And even though I managed to get a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in chemical engineering, I still knew things were wrong. Something wasn't right. I lived in a fantasy world. I tried different things as a shortcut to fix things. One thing I did that was extremely dumb, I got married. I figured everybody in the movies that gets married, they have this wonderful life and the guys are big and strong. And I guess if we're in Europe, we can kick your ass. And if we're in the US, we just shoot you. That's the way we do it here. And marriage didn't do that for me. And of course, the girl I married, well, she wasn't any better off at choosing a mate than I was. And we had a disastrous marriage. Sometimes I laughingly refer to her as the dragon lady, but in truth, 50% of the problem surely was mine. I had a job designing and constructing the nuclear power plants for US Navy submarines, which was not a really good job for an active alcoholic, okay? You would not have wanted me in that job. And one time my boss talked to me about the poor performance that I was giving on the job. And I had what I call my aha moment. I saw for the first time my true self. And my boss didn't rag on me for a long time. It was probably 10 or 15 minutes of really severe criticism. But I suddenly saw that I wasn't very honest morally. I didn't even have good cash register honesty. You know, I would steal a dollar. I wasn't willing to give an hour's work for an hour's pay. I was very egotistical. I was the only one that counted. And especially hurtful to me at that time, I had absolutely no professional respect from the people I worked with. My family was down the drain, although I wasn't divorced at the time. My ex and kids were living in another city a couple of 100 miles away. And so I saw all this was wrong in my life, but this ninja level denial system of mine, I could not figure out what the hell it was. So part of what happened was I had a neighbor, a retired submarine sailor in this little town in Connecticut, and he took me to an AA meeting. And it was at a very upscale, ritzy rehab in the state of Rhode Island, which is just picturesque as hell. And I went there and I saw these rich people getting sober, and I went to the meeting and I saw the 12 steps on a big poster behind the speaker. And I liked everything I saw. I especially liked those words, God as we understood him. Well, the problem was, I didn't know what my problem was. Couldn't be alcohol. So I kept going back to the AA meetings, and I got my first taste for the values for me that were important if I could solve this problem, because I saw AA members with sobriety and they had their lives in order. They had fixed their family problems. They were financially stable. They might not be rich. In this case, they were, but they knew how to work. They knew how to manage their money to pay their bills. They knew how to select their friends. They looked like they were at ease. And I saw these things, and I even got a little taste of what serenity must be from listening to people like you back then. And I just wished I was an alcoholic. Well, it was just before Christmas in 1971, and 71, yeah, and I took a drink of wine. I was visiting with my ex-wife and kids, and I had a drink of wine. And in about 15 minutes, I really wanted a drink of wine. And I thought, those guys and gals at AA, they're right that once I pick up a drink, I just light the fuse. 15 minutes later, withdrawal hits, and I want another drink. And I'm going to have to repeat that cycle of drink, waiting 15 minutes, drink, wait 15 minutes until I'm horizontal or I'm out of alcohol. Normally I was out horizontal first. And I realized I was an alcoholic. So I drove back to Connecticut and I had a home group, by the way. I wasn't an alcoholic, you see, but I had a home group. And I figured it was from my dynamic personality. They kept inviting me back to this group. And I think they were doing it for the same reasons that we are invited into the emergency room at a hospital if we're sneezing and coughing today. It was part of a healthcare program. And maybe they didn't want me out building nuclear submarines while I was drunk. But anyway, I knew I was an alcoholic. And back then in Connecticut, AA consisted of the big book, the 12 and 12, and a little bit of literature. My big issue at the time was the God thing. I was quite emotionally worked over by the Baptists from when I was a kid in Kentucky. I grew up in that Southern atmosphere. So AA was a good fit for me. I didn't need anything fancy. I didn't need alternative steps. God as we understood him, I didn't understand God, but what the hell, that's an understanding, right? And so I jumped right into the steps and they really fit. The big mistake I made was not getting a sponsor right away. So if you're new and you don't have a sponsor, find one. Don't wait like I did for 6 months. That's 6 months of a lot of wheel spinning and not a lot of distance put under the keel. But it did work for me. Those steps did. Now, when it came to the God side, the spiritual side, belief, whatever you want to call it, I did just what the big book said. I tried prayer and I tried meditation. Now, with the prayer thing, I just couldn't get a dial tone when I tried to talk to God. And if you don't know what a dial tone is, find some old fart, we know. And but I couldn't make the connection. But meditation helped a lot. I meditated on topics I got from books I was reading by Carl Sagan, the astronomer. And so I got sober. I never picked up another drink after that first meeting where I admitted I was an alcoholic. In the intervening years, a couple of things that popped up to me is I wanted to work on my sobriety so that I didn't have to go to a meeting every day. And I figured if I stayed at it long enough, I could cut back a little bit. And today I go to primarily one meeting a week, and that suits me. But that's not for everybody. That's just for me. And by the way, my wife has 52 years in AA. So, you know, I'm in a 24/7 meeting here. And so I get an awful lot from my marriage as well as going to my meeting. But I drifted as I worked on steps 3 and 11, and I worked on them for 30 something years, by the way. But I was comfortable because there was no clock ticking. There was no one pointing at a calendar because I hadn't completely wrapped up and nailed the lid on steps 3 and 11. And I just kept working on it, and I found myself drifting from confusion to agnosticism. That is, I didn't know. And as I kept right on studying, I used a book called God Delusion by Dr. Dawkins, Dr. Richard Dawkins. And I finally figured out, after I'd been sober about 35 years, that I was an atheist. And I was very comfortable with that because it helped me shed this residual guilt and shame that I carried with me from when I was a little kid. Now, guilt, I still feel a little guilt every now and then. Guilt means, and my wife, by the way, was a counselor, and she taught me guilt is I made a mistake. Shame is I am a mistake. And I was able to get rid of that stuff. And I connected it all with Old Testament stories and all. But anyway, it's behind me now. I've learned that for me, the values of my sobriety, other than the standard stuff, you know, the serenity, the values are what I can do for another individual. And it doesn't mean I'm going to do anything fantastic, but do no harm and try to be a positive factor in other people's lives. Learn to accept, learn to tolerate, be inquisitive, especially with newcomers in AA. The world is complex today, and our newcomers aren't what we had back when I came in. Today, you hardly ever see a newcomer that hasn't also battled demon drugs. It's just the way things are today. And of course, we have a lot of pressures on us today with the world as it is. And we really owe our newcomers a lot of consideration, tolerance, acceptance, to help them find out about AA and sobriety. One thing for me, and I've learned this from a lot of people in AA, recovery is not just the big book and the 12 and the 12 and the literature. It's, for me, I had 3 years of immersion in secular Buddhism. I went every Sunday morning to hear a lecture and learn to meditate. And I meditate every day, especially this morning. And I've found that that's very good for me. I've found that talking to Robert, at least weekly, is really good for my mental health. He has done so much for me. And there's a couple other people that I sponsor here in the Boise area. And they're very good for me. I get far more from these people that I sponsor than I give, I think. They don't always see it, but I do. It makes a big difference. As far as other values of sobriety, being in AA for 50 years might not mean squat. Just because I haven't had a drink for 50 years doesn't mean that I am the paragon of sobriety. And so that 50-year medallion doesn't mean to me today what I thought it would mean 20, 30, 40 years ago. It's just a medallion. I guess if I'd saved all my medallions, I could melt them down and make a cannon or a big belt buckle or something. But it's just a medallion. My sobriety is not that medallion. My sobriety is really what I can give that will be of positive value to another person. Before I get out of here, I did want to say, if you're new to the program and you didn't hear from me anything that is earth-shattering, you're just listening to the wrong dude. There's somebody out there that's going to say the things you need to hear. If you're not sure about AA as a way to get sober, it's not a bad place to be till you figure out where you ought to be, because you're around sober people. The biggest, most valuable asset of AA to me today is the fellowship. It's you guys out there, I guess, all over the world, looking at me from little bitty teeny squares on my great big monitor. You're sober human beings in Alcoholics Anonymous. And it means an awful lot to me to know that you're out there and to see you. And you've really made my Monday morning by allowing Robert to cajole you into inviting me. And I want to thank you for that. And I look forward to the rest of the meeting. Have a good day now.
Thank you, Wally. Great to hear your story. And thank you, Robert.